Taoiseach, I wish to raise with you this morning the report of the expert panel on concrete blocks in Donegal and in County Mayo, which was published 2 weeks ago. This report, Taoiseach, outlines how up to 4,800 homes in County Donegal and 345 homes in County Mayo are affected by defective blocks. It identified the issue in County Donegal as being the presence of the mineral muscovite mica in the blocks, while in County Mayo it identified the presence of pyrite in the blocks as the reason for their being defective. The report also outlined that this happened, Minister Taoiseach, as a result of a failure to implement appropriate manufacturing standards and also as a result of a failure of the building control authorities to properly oversee manufacturing standards. Anyone who watched Prime Time last Thursday night and saw Eddie and Maria McDade from McConalogue and County Donegal show their home to the cameras and saw Mr McDade put his foot to the base of the block at the outside of his home, Minister, and actually take that block apart with his foot, would have been horrified. And I want to commend Prime Time for their public service in actually having that programme last week and indeed in doing a similar programme a number of months ago. Families such as the McDades, Taoiseach, are living a nightmare. They are faced with a situation where their homes, which they have put their life and soul into, are deteriorating and in cases crumbling around them. They are facing a situation where they still have to pay a mortgage in those homes and they can't get insurance for those homes. Up until now, Minister, the government's response to this has been entirely unsatisfactory. It has tried to delay having to deal with this issue. It delayed initially on agreeing to establish the expert panel. When it did announce the establishment of that panel in November 2015, the terms of reference gave the panel a report date of May 2016. Yet the government didn't put the full membership of that committee in place until April 2016. This meant the report was then delayed until October last year. It was then delayed until December last year, and when the draft report was submitted to the department in January-February of this year, the government still didn't get around to publishing it until 2 weeks ago. This delaying must stop, and these families must be offered hope and a way out of their nightmare. There was a large meeting in Donegal of affected homeowners last night, Taoiseach, and what we now need, and what those people who are living that nightmare need, is they need a commitment from you and from the government that you will put a remediation scheme in place, as happened with the pyrite cases in east of the country before now. And I'm asking you here today, Taoiseach, will the government give a commitment to put a remediation scheme in place?
Thank you, Deputy.
And will you also implement the full recommendations of the expert panel report?
Thank you very much, Deputy. Well, first of all, I want to say that I and the Government recognise the seriousness of the issue that you're raising this morning and, of course, the impact that it has on individual families. It's absolutely distressing for these families, over 5,000 houses that include local authority and private housing. The Minister has received the report in the last short period and is now examining the recommendations. The Government haven't delayed. The Government take it very seriously and are determined to find the solutions and to help those families. The expert report has been received very recently. I think that was the right route to go, to have experts examine what precisely the technical solutions should be, because we have to examine what those might be and what action can be taken, and then put the solutions in place. But I'm sure you'll agree that the Department should, in the first instance, and the Minister, examine the recommendations. But I do want to assure you and all of the people who have been affected by this that the Government is determined to deal with the situation and to take action to help the families that you describe, because it is extraordinarily distressing to either buy a house or to be living in a house where a problem such as this and such a serious problem has emerged. And I do want to reassure you, you've talked about a remediation scheme. I do do want to assure you that the ministers are determined to deal with this, to put the proper solutions in place and to help the families who have been impacted by this.
And Taoiseach, my specific question to you was, will the government give a commitment to put a remediation scheme in place? So far, Minister English or Minister Murphy, or indeed the Taoiseach here when I raised this with them last week, have not given such a commitment. And nothing less than that is required here. So maybe when you come back further, Taoiseach, can you address that point? The terms of reference of the expert panel did not include dealing with whether there should be a remediation scheme. That was left for afterwards. It was left for the politicians to deal with. Minister English, after the delays which I outlined previously in the panel reporting, this draft report has been with the government since the start of this year. There has been sufficient time and lots of time already to consider the issue and to consider its recommendations. Can I just ask you specifically, Taoiseach, we should not be delaying any further in this. Can you give a commitment here this morning that a remediation scheme will be put in place, and also in relation to the full recommendations of that expert panel, in relation to ensuring that controls are put in place to ensure this can never happen again?
Thank you,
will
Deputy.
all the recommendations be implemented?
Well, I understand that in this report that has been received by the Minister, there are 8 recommendations, 2 of which are being implemented immediately, and there are quite a number of different stakeholders involved in this issue, Deputy. So there is a need for the expert report to be analysed, to, I assume, bring the stakeholders together. Before I can answer that question precisely, I think you'll appreciate that we need to see precisely what the technical solutions are, to look at the who the stakeholders are, where the responsibility lies and so forth. But as I've said to you already, there is a determination by the Minister to deal with the issue. We do recognise, as I've said already, how very difficult this is for the families involved and the need for an urgent solution, as you say. But the report, I think it was the right route to go, to get the expert report, to look at the solutions, and the Ministers will act on it immediately.